Good morning. Today is Tuesday, April 4th, 2023. My name is Lenine Livingston. I'm the Public Information Officer for the Fairbanks North Star Borough. We are live streaming to the Borough's YouTube channel today. We are in the Mona Lisa Drexler Assembly Chambers here in the Juanita Helms Administration Center. Today running our slide deck is my Chief of Staff, Jim Williams, and we also have Special Assistant to the Mayor, Megan Hayes, with us. I would now like to introduce Borough Mayor Bryce Ward to give the live address for the state of the borough. Mayor?
All right, thank you, Lenine. And just for folks' information, this is what we've started doing a couple years ago, where we do a state of the borough at the same time as we do a release of our budget. So let's go next slide there. So today we're going to talk about the accomplishments that we had for this last year, some of the highlights of things that have happened. We're going to talk about those challenges that we faced in this last year. I'm going to go over the highlights of the FY24 budget, and then we're going to go over future goals and what we hope to achieve with the upcoming budget that we've got going to the Assembly. Start us off with the CIP, the Capital Improvement Program. We're starting our third biennial update. So we're in year 5 right now of that particular program. It's been working very successfully. We've got about $12.5 million that are going to be contributed to the CIPMR this year as part of the budget. And we've got more information on our website, fnsb.gov/CIP. A couple of the highlights. The Assembly passed an ordinance a few years ago that requires that the mayor's budget includes 10% of estimated revenue go into the CIPMR. I'm happy to say over the last few years we've been able to do that. We'll do that again this year. That's that $12.5 million that's going into that particular program. Looking at the program since its inception, we've got about $80 million in projects that have been authorized by the Assembly. Not all of those have been started at this time, but this has been a very successful program to address the deferred maintenance issues we have here at the borough, as well as address the needs and desires that the community has for our public infrastructure for the years to come. All right, so the housing tax exemption, this was approved in the last year by ordinance with the Assembly. We had 6 successful applications come through last year. Many of those are in construction or have been completed. The application period does end on December 31st of this year. We've got a number of applications that are in queue right now, some that have been heard by the Economic Development Commission and are queued up and to be heard by the Assembly. So as the construction season rolls on, we anticipate to see more of those applications come in. We had about 50 units that were under construction or constructed this last year as a part of that particular program. If folks are interested, I would encourage them to reach out to the administration to work on those applications as they are due by December 31st, 2023, this fall, winter. And then I would also let folks know that there is a 2-year construction window. So from the time of approval, you have 2 years to complete those projects. Talking about achievements this next year, or that we've accomplished this last year, one of our first projects as part of the Capital Improvement Program, the skate park rehab, was completed. It is truly, I think, a world-class, at least Alaska-class skate park that we have, and we had a few weeks of season last year. We're looking forward to a whole season of that particular facility this upcoming summer. The South Cushman shooting range was completed prior to moose hunting season. That was the big key date that we were looking for there. That has been open all winter, and we've had a lot of success with that particular project. That was a partnership with some federal agencies as well as the Fairbanks North Star Borough's Capital Improvement Program to complete that project. Last year, the Pleasant Valley Two Rivers Fire Service Area was created by local election, and I'm happy to go over more details on the proposed budget for the fire service area here in a few minutes. Our CEDS was adopted by the Assembly. That's the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. The borough serves as the ARDR for the local area, and that went through about a 2-year process to develop and eventually get adopted. And then overall, we've just been busy. We've had a lot of projects and programs that we've been working on that have been authorized in prior years, and staff has been doing a great job of bringing those things to completion. I'd also be remiss if I didn't talk about the ARPA, American Rescue Plan, projects that we have that are underway and ongoing. We've got a number of projects that were authorized by the Assembly in the last fiscal year. that we're working on, particularly the healthcare premium pay for essential workers. This is ongoing. We've got a partnership with Foundation Health Partners here in town, our hospital, where we're able to provide those additional resources for them to ensure that they've got full staff, or at least as fully staffed workforce as they can. Explore Fairbanks has also been beneficiary of a tourism grant as a part of that program. This last year wrapped that particular program up. We're doing the final paperwork now as we get those receipts. We've also got the Birch Hill Snow Groomer, which was delivered prior to the Junior Nationals that were done here last month. It's a great piece of equipment that we're happy to have in possession of the community here and doing good work. Also, our Health and Social Services pass-through grants are ongoing. We did make awards to those particular agencies in town, and they're working through the particular programs that they pitched to the commission and that were approved. Our oil to gas conversion program was also plussed up by additional ARPA money this last year, and we've seen a lot of success with that particular program in the market. IGU did over 600 conversions last year, or turn-ons for their system, and we're looking at another very successful year with that program. We've got TAS grant money as well as ARPA money that are used in that particular program. The Assembly also did approve a bus driver premium pay, roughly $1 million. That is actually was, I don't know if did it get signed? We did get signed, that's right, okay. So that is currently in its execution phase right now as we work with the district and with Durham, the bus driver for the school district, to get that payout into bus drivers' hands. We've also started a class and comp study looking at some of the challenges we've had this last year with the workforce, recognize that some of our positions are not necessarily as competitive as they could be in the market. So we were authorized to do a class and comp study, which not only looks at our classification of those positions, but then how we compensate them, what type of attributes to that job description are we looking for, and are we appropriately compensating them to the market. All right, other achievements, we did settle an ongoing litigation, property tax value litigation with Fort Knox, Kinross here in this last year. That was a pretty substantial one. The borough did have money set aside for that settlement, as we were not sure the outcome of that. That does put that to bed, and I think we've been able to move forward from that particular issue. As I mentioned, the oil to gas conversion has been very popular. We were awarded an additional targeted airshed grant this last year to support the program. We've got literally tens of millions of dollars in the wood stove and the oil to gas conversion program now that is available to our community. So working with the Interior Gas Utility, IGU, we're hoping to get many of those dollars out into the community to continue to help address the air quality issue here in Fairbanks. And also we've worked to develop land sales in the Fairbanks North Star Borough. Through the pandemic, actually one of the most popular things that we had available was our land. All of that land was sold, and so we are in the process of developing new lands to go out to the market for sale to individuals. We actually have a public auction out right now for folks to put in their highest bid for that property. Some of the challenges we faced this last year, the EPA partially disapproved the Sirius SIP. This has been a significant blow to the community, one that we've been working with the DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation, on for responses to that partial disapproval. This has huge ramifications to our community. If we don't get our airshed cleaned up and have an approvable plan, we face sanctions and other type of penalties that the federal government imposes on communities when they get to this level. So this is certainly a challenge that we've had, and we have not been able to meet those air quality standards as outlined by the EPA for PM 2.5. Another challenge that we have is the EPA has also announced that they're reducing the national air quality control standards. Looking at lowering those standards is going to make it more difficult for our community to come into attainment, and just particularly challenging with the Arctic environment that we live in. The borough continues to face workplace shortages. These are impacting particularly of services to the community, our pool availability, and our bus routes, our public transportation, the max transit system. Folks may know that our pool system, some of our early morning swims have been shut down because we don't have lifeguards. We've had many of our bus routes that are no longer doing, none of our bus routes are doing weekend service anymore because we're not able to keep those staffed. We've also got other routes that have been impacted because of that. So we engaged with our local 942 union and actually have a training program. So if folks are interested in becoming a bus driver, we'll actually help you get your CDL and go through that program to get you trained up to be one of our bus drivers. We're also, our Parks and Rec staff are working creatively to try to attract lifeguards, looking at our scheduling, looking at training availability, so we can get those pools and facilities back open fully like they were pre-pandemic. Another big thing that's impacting us over this last year has been the high cost of inflation. Folks are feeling it everywhere, in the grocery stores, at the gas pump. Your local government also feels it in the services that we provide and the commodities that we have to buy, as well as our contracts, our wage contracts that we have for our collective bargaining agreements. These are all factors that are particularly challenging when we talk about the upcoming budget season. So as we talk about our budget, I'm going to jump into that here. Really, there's a couple of the goals the administration has put forward for development of the budget. One of them is stability of government services. We know that our market relies on many of the services, our community relies on the services that we provide, whether it's our education system, public transportation, parks and recreation, libraries, etc. So a key piece to the budget this year is stability. What are we doing to maintain those services at a level that the community expects? Also, what are we doing to develop efficiencies and streamline our government processes? Oftentimes it can be difficult working with your local government. It's not necessarily intuitive all the time, and so we're looking at those processes and how we can continually make that better and a better engagement with the community. Promote development of quality construction. We know that as we look at growth in our community, both on the residential side and the commercial side, do we have policies and procedures that promote that type of activity that we want? The Assembly approved roughly 2 years ago a home energy tax credit for new construction, where we look at that high standard, that 6-star quality standard. If you meet that, you're eligible for up to $7,500 off your first year in taxes. So these are things that we're looking at to make sure that we're promoting the type of quality construction that we want to see here in the borough. Stuff that has longevity, will last for generations. Also, as a part of our budget goals is lowering our operating cost and application downward pressure on the tax base. We hear this consistently from folks that it is expensive to live here, both from a commodities perspective, but then also for taxes. And so that's certainly been a key piece of the development of the budget strategy as we move forward. So talk about budget highlights. The FY24 recommended comprehensive operating budget, this is everything all inclusive, is $188,489,473, which reflects about a 1.9% increase over the revised 22-23 budget. Again, I would say that this is pretty significant considering the fact that we're looking at about an 8.1% inflation for the urban area. So we did our best to keep that down. We're under inflation for this last year, which is a pretty significant challenge, a pretty significant thing for us to come up with. When we look at your area-wide budget, your general government, the things that you typically think about when you think of the borough, the services that we provide, parks and rec, libraries, administration, et cetera, that number we were able to keep down at a less than 1% growth for the FY24 budget. That budget, this is not all inclusive, but just the area-wide piece is $150.6 million. So it's an increase of about $1.4 million over prior year, like I said, or less than 1%. So that's pretty significant. What that means for the mill rate, our area-wide mill rate is projected. This is based on estimated tax values to drop by 0.599 mils. That gives a new estimated area-wide mill levy of 11.691 mils. This is one of the lower ones we've seen in the last several decades. It's not the lowest, but it is within several tenths of a mil of being at that point. As I mentioned, that the FY24 budget is the area-wide budget includes that $1.4 million increase, less than 1%, which also includes a $3.4 million increase to the school district and local contribution. So again, looking at that $1.4 million increase, $3.4 million of that is additional funding to the school district through our local funding. We're $16.5 million under the tax revenue cap. This is one of the largest numbers I've seen since I've been here of how far we're under the tax cap, and includes no changes in services over prior year. There's no additional FTEs included in this budget. Okay, looking at mill rates, I mentioned that this year's estimated mill rate is 11.691. This is based on the estimated values that we have at this time. They're typically, as we go through our budget process, as we go through our appeals, that number gets more refined, and we actually have certified numbers starting June 1st. So subject to change, but usually it tends to go down depending on how we end up getting our total values in. So as I mentioned, this is one of the lowest numbers we've seen in quite some time. Historical revenue by category, we've been relatively flat over the last 4 years on the amount of taxes that we've collected. Folks, we've had lots of conversation about the increase in values, about the mill rate itself, which has actually come down over 2 mills in the last 2 years. But our overall revenue is expected to remain relatively stable based on the drop in the mill rate and then the increases that we've seen across the board in values. Going over our cost by department, education continues to be one of the largest things that we fund here at the Fairbanks North Star Borough. I'll go over more of those numbers in a minute, but this is a breakdown of how our departments have changed over year. Virtually all of our departments have seen some increase, again, based on our contracts that we have and the cost of inflation, but that's been held down minimal, like I said, less than 1%. I mentioned our contributions to the CIPMR. We're at $12.5 million this year. This is the most that we've contributed in our budget. There have been supplementals that have been introduced to the CIPMR over the years, but as we talk about this new budget process, we have consistently been contributing roughly $12+ million every year into the CIPMR, which is the CIPMR is based on a $12 million contribution from the general fund every year, so we're actually exceeding those numbers just by a little bit, but it's significant. I mentioned inflation. The CPI for the local area is 8.1% for urban Alaska. That's, as I mentioned, that's certainly something that we've seen has been a challenge this last year. However, on the other hand, we have seen a significant increase in treasury rates. The borough does have significant amount of investments as our revenues come in periodically throughout the year, where we historically have seen very low numbers, less than 1%. I'd say less than 0.1% in interest earned on that fund, on those monies. It's actually north of 4.5% today. So that's a significant piece of the revenue portion when we look at our budget. That does offset taxes that we have to raise. So that number is significantly higher than it's been in prior years in the budget. The estimated net taxable area as of the printing of the budget was $481 million, or about a 4.9% increase from the 2022 budget, which means, as I mentioned, that area-wide mill rate, as presented, we're expecting a decrease of 0.599 mils. The budget uses $3.9 million from fund balance. This is mainly our debt service fund. This is the total operating budget, that $188 million number, and contributes about $6.4 million to fund balance. This is across all funds. This is primarily looking at, again, our debt service, solid waste collection district, our solid waste funds as well. The area-wide general government does not include any contribution to or from fund balance, so it is balanced within the existing revenues we expect to raise this next year. And I mentioned that we're $16.5 million under the approved tax revenue cap with this proposed budget. Talking about the school district, the budget assumes about half the support from the state in school debt bond reimbursement. Full entitlement this year would be about $6.5 million. This number was up pretty significantly over in past years, but we've been paying our debt down. It's been a number of years since the borough has taken on additional debt, and so we continue to pay that off at a pretty good rate. So this year, full entitlement, that's that 70% that the state has agreed, subject to appropriation, to reimburse the borough for payment of debt service. Our budget, the budget that we put forward, that the administration's put forward, accounts for half of that. And if there is any additional money that comes in by this budget, it would roll back into the debt service fund, which allows us to either pay off that debt early or secure payments for those debts at a faster rate. We also, as I mentioned, include a increase to the school district, local contribution to the school district of $3.4 million. This is how much the local required contribution increased this past year. It grew by about 10%, which is pretty significant. This is how much we have to contribute to education funding as a part of state law. That is deducted from the basic need as identified for the district. So even though there's a $3.4 million increase included in this budget, it doesn't mean that the district actually gets any more education funding as a part of that basic needs structure that the state has developed. This is just our contribution to the education system. And in order to hold the district harmless from that adjustment, we have to increase by that amount. That means the total amount of contribution to the school district this year is $55.5 million. This is one of the highest numbers that we've had, I think, ever. But that does reflect that increase in the required local contribution. The Pleasant Valley Two Rivers Fire Service Area, this is a big topic of discussion with the Assembly right now, includes the recommended $51,000 budget as came from the Fire Service Area Commission, with an estimated a mill levy of 0.504 mils. There is no contribution to the Vehicle Fleet Fund as a part of this budget. We are proposing with an ordinance that's been introduced to the Assembly to change from a VEF to a VER. So instead of a fleet fund, we would have a fleet reserve. This gives us greater flexibility to be able to make appropriations for those vehicle purchases over time. We've had challenges with the appropriations over the last several years with the large increases that we've seen in the automotive market right now, making it difficult for us to make those purchases. So our hope is that by converting this to a reserve, similar to how we do the capital fund, that we can make allocations every year to that and then make appropriations for the appropriate vehicle purchases. Because we have a number of appropriations that have not lapsed and are basically held out there because we don't have enough money to buy the vehicles, our proposal is to take that outstanding balance from the VEF, roll it into the VER, which means that we actually have enough money to make the vehicle purchases we need for this year. It's a one-time deal. We will need to continue to pick up contributions to the fleet fund or to the fleet reserve in future years, but for this year, it's a way to save some money. It's a way for us to get that program up and running, and it's not needed at this time. But I am letting folks know that will be a contribution that's needed in future years. Talking about fees and adjustments to the FY24 budget, the FY24 budget does include an increase of $200 for EMS transport fees to bring the total amount to $1,300 per transport. There is a non-transport fee adjustment in there as well. And all of our other user fees were reviewed and compared with a recovery matrix, looking at the level of the tiered response for the level of service that we provide and the expected amount of recovery that we have for each one of those levels of service. That does mean that there's a number of adjustments in our fee schedule this year. A lot of those were looked at not only in comparison with the recovery matrix, but then also looking at that high cost of inflation. Again, as we have increased cost at the borough, those fees, many of them hadn't been adjusted in years. There is a pretty wide approach to fee adjustment in this upcoming budget. Looking to the future, there's a number of projects that are going to be impacting services this year. We've got 3 major projects. The first one is the Westcott Pool renovation project. This was approved by the Assembly here this spring, which means that facility is going to be closed for roughly about a year as we go through the full suite of renovations there. Nolween Library is also going through a major renovation. The closures are here starting, I think, very soon, if not already. And that's going to impact for roughly about a year, 9 to 10 months. We do have alternative sites set up at Joy Elementary as well as the North Pole Library for those services, but Nolween Library will be impacted this year as we go through that construction season. Groudon Field is also going to be going through renovation. The turf is getting replaced there. This is one of our first year capital improvement program projects as part of the CIP. So we're happy to get that up in construction this year, as well as the long-awaited transit maintenance garage. We started construction late last fall, and so you'll actually see vertical construction happening this year. Excuse me. Looking to the community as a whole, we expect to see another 250 personnel as a part of the KC-135 mission for the Eielson growth. This is something we've been working with our installation leaders on. This is a good thing for the community, and it's a great thing for Eielson Air Force Base as we look at the mission and we look at support of our nation's defense. This is expected to be over a several-year period. The Air Force is still working on the exact timing of those individuals, but we know that they're coming. And so we want to make sure that the community is prepared for that. Housing continues to be a big topic of conversation. And I would say that we need to expect that we are going to see these 250 personnel inbound over the next few years, so we need to be building to accommodate that now. We are expecting as well about another 100 additional personnel as a part of the ILSN team to support the F-35 mission and the base operations. ILSN leadership has shared with us that as a part of the growth and expansion, they have found that there is a deficiency of about 100 people. So they're working through that appropriations process with the Air Force. But that is something I want to let the community know, that we're expecting to see another 100 people. So that's a total of about 350 people over the next several years as a part of the ILSN mission. Contract negotiations are expected to start here in the next few months. This is for the FY24 year. This is for our 3 bargaining units here at the Fairbanks North Star Borough, our APA contract, our ASCA contract, and our 942 laborers contract. So we'll be working with the Assembly to establish priorities and goals here as the summer goes on, and then we'll start negotiations in the fall. And as I mentioned, the additional housing need for ILSN, I think it's important to recognize that we continue to see that our community is below what we would like to see as far as some of those general statistics for availability of housing in the market. We'd like to see about 3 months worth of inventory. We're about 2 months in Fairbanks and North Pole, or a little bit under that, and about a 10% vacancy rate. And we're just under that 10% vacancy rate at the moment. So housing continues to be a need as we talk about inbound personnel for ILSN. We talk about the changes with the 11th Airborne at Fort Wainwright. Recognize that there are changes happening in the community, and we need to take that into consideration. And just to meet status quo from where we're at right now isn't going to be good enough. We need to continue to make improvements at that area in the market. And that wraps up what we have for the State of the Borough highlights from this last year, things that we're looking forward with this upcoming budget. It's a pretty lean and status quo budget as far as things are concerned. We are going to be releasing this here on the website if folks are interested in downloading that. We will have paper copies coming here in the next few days. But if folks are interested, that digital version is going to be online here in just a few minutes. And then I would encourage folks to engage with the Assembly. So at this point, the administration is proposing the recommended budget. This will go to the Assembly. They're going to have a work session on Thursday with our CFO. And then starting right away on Saturday, they're going to go right into work sessions with the Finance Committee. And so all of April, basically, Saturdays are going to be reserved for that. And so the Assembly will be working here in the chambers on the budget. We expect to go through that, have a recommendation that'll go to the Assembly as a whole, starting for a public hearing on May 4th. So the public is welcome to come and provide testimony at that time. And then May 11th, generally speaking, is adoption. Typically, the Assembly does public hearing one night and then moves and starts to do the work the next night. But that's some of the highlights as far as engagement for folks over the next few weeks. And be happy to take questions at this time. We do have folks, guests in the audience from the media. So thanks for watching.
You mentioned that the U.S. Treasury rates have risen, and I'm wondering how much of the borough does the borough have invested in Treasury bonds, or is this the business?
So we have an investment strategy, and I don't have the exact details on all of those investments. They're typically very conservative. We're talking about public dollars, and so we have a pretty strict policy on what we can invest in. But I'd be happy to get more details as to what that investment strategy is. But I'm looking to our CFO to maybe give a head nod if bonds is a piece of that. No. Okay. Certainly. So everyone understands. The question was on investment strategy and investment for Treasury bonds. Al? Oh.
So have you had a chance to look at the school district's proposed budget this year?
So have I looked at the school district's proposed budget? I have. Their increase is more than what I've included in my budget. I've worked with the administration to let them know what my number would be several months ago. The school board did include a recommendation that includes an increase, and so that is not accounted for in my budget, above and beyond what that $3.4 million increase is.
How does it compare, like in amount?
It's several $1 million short of where our contribution is.
You mentioned a wage comparison. So what's that process coming out?
Could you say that again?
Your wage and salary comparison, how is that coming out?
So the wage and comp study is ongoing at this time. What we're currently doing is the evaluation of job descriptions to make sure that the positions are actually appropriately scoped. So we've got that work that actually concludes, I think, today or this week. And then we start going into the contractors able to take those job descriptions and look at them on a market analysis for other governments and other agencies. So we're just in the very early phases of that.
Where are you seeing the most room for employee retention and recruitment for the department?
So where are we seeing the most challenges for employee retention recruitments? I would say generally across the board, we see challenges. It tends to be more so with our professional positions and our seasonal positions where we see most of the challenges. I would say that there are probably some departments that it impacts more. Finance has been one that in the past has been significantly impacted, but it's really felt across the board. As we come into the summer season, our summer hire positions are one of the most challenging ones because they're not long-term. They're only for the season.
Follow up on school funding. How reliable is the school board reimbursement? A lot from the, I mean, the amount you budgeted for it. Are you confident that the state will come through?
I'm not terribly confident on school debt bond reimbursement. The state has, in the last budget, the state did contribute basically all of the back payments that we did not receive for school debt bond reimbursement, but they come very inconsistently. And so as a strategy, working with the Assembly, what we've said is any additional revenue that we receive from the state for debt reimbursement goes into the debt service fund, which helps protect the tax base from wild swings. So as part of the budget that we put forward, we expected half of that to be paid for, half of the school debt bond reimbursement that we would expect to see, we're expecting our tax base to pay for. The other half we're expecting the state to contribute. If the state doesn't contribute anything, we're only short half that amount, $3.5 million, which my proposal would be we pull from the debt service fund, which would not impact taxes. So we're trying to build a system that is isolated from what the legislature does on a year-to-year basis. It gives us a little bit more time to make adjustment. When it was Governor Walker that made the initial vetoes several years ago, the borough was left trying to come up with about $12 million in additional revenue to pay for the debt. That was very challenging. We're certainly in a bit of a different boat. We got about half that amount because we paid off a significant amount of debt, but it still is taxpayer dollars. So we're trying to look at how we can still meet our obligations and yet not drastically swing the mill rate when it comes to the tax base. So I feel confident that even if the legislature were not to approve anything in school debt bond reimbursement this year, we could still move forward with the budget as proposed. It will have impacts on future years, but it's something that we can deal with the current year without a major adjustment.
You mentioned the borough was reviewing fees for EMS services, for user fees. How is that looking? Is there going to be an increase in user fees, and do we have an amount on that?
So we're proposing a $200 increase per transport. Every $100 in EMS transport fees only results in about $50,000 in revenue generated for the borough. A number of reasons for that, one of it being is our reimbursement rate. We're not reimbursed the full amount for Medicaid, Medicare. And so even though we increase that amount, we're not necessarily recovering that full amount. But we do recognize that we see additional costs that are a part of the EMS system, and we need to generate the revenue to help pay for that.
One more discussion later, because would you read the little kind about rivers in Valley Fire Service status and
So the Pleasant Valley Two Rivers Fire Service area commission met actually last night. Their recommended budget for this upcoming year is $51,000, which includes $25,000 for education and prevention, and $25,000 to their fund balance and $1,000 in administrative fees. So my budget reflects that request. If it's approved by the Assembly, we'll start working with the community, with organizations to try to find someone that is able to do that work, or we may bring a proposal forward where our staff is able to help. If it's handing out fire extinguishers or doing smoke alarm kind of analysis, we may be able to do some of that in-house and save some money for the fire service area. But ultimately, we're going to be working through those details as to how we execute that contract. It's different than any of our other fire service areas, so it's a little bit, it'll be interesting. We're developing some new things for that, but the community, the commission's rallied behind that number, and we're supporting it with the budget. I've been present, or borough staff's been present at those meetings so far. So.
So you mentioned that the need for additional housing in the North Pole area is likely to be over a 3-year period. With the exemption ending in December 31st of this year, would you be in favor of an extension of that exemption should the need continue past that point?
Possibly. It's certainly been a topic of discussion within the mayor's office of, are we seeing the appropriate type of construction to help meet that need? And then does the exemption need to be extended to be able to continue to see that type of development? At this point, I don't have any direction on, are we going to look at extending it? I would say if folks are interested, of course that would take assembly authorization, but if folks are interested, I would encourage them to get their applications in sooner than later, because it is expected to sunset December 31st. The nomination closes this Friday for the Family Friendly Workplace Awards. So if you or your workplace is interested in applying for that, or if you work at a great place and you want to recognize that, that's your opportunity. And that's available on our website, fnsb.gov. So I just let folks know that the budget is out. I'm not sure if we published it quite yet, but all right, it's going to be out there live on the website. So great opportunity to engage with your assembly as we have our budget discussions with the Assembly over the next month. This is the biggest policy document of the Fairbanks North Star Borough. This is what your government does here, is provide services, and the budget's the way that we do that. So I encourage folks to engage. All right, thanks everyone.